A pretty damn uneventful operating or stock round. The only thing that happened was this fellow bought his second share of BBCI, giving him control of the company. It's not going to mean much. If he had more time, he might be able to buy them all up and do some juggling and, you know, move one of his permanent trains over there and really make it pretty rich. But there just isn't that kind of time there. The elephant actually moves to here, so even if he did play around with it without making the share moves first, it would be kind of problematic. Now, here's the thing. If he really wanted to optimize, and maybe I should do this, he'd get rid of... Nah, you can't get rid of his BNRs. He'd get rid of some of his crappier shares. Things like the SIR, which honestly isn't going to make that much more. They're running approximately the same kind of trains in not quite the same area, but that's okay. This is pretty rich. He'd get rid of his BNR, SIR. He'd probably get rid of maybe the NWR. Hard to tell, because that's making such big jumps in the stock market. And shift this train. Hold his 40% in the BBCI. Certainly if he could hold 60, he would do this. Because the BBCI would jump on the stock market and make quite a bit of money, whereas the BNR would not at 2 shares. But could he afford the stock market on the BNR not going up? Well, that's a pretty big jump, $16.32, but he's taking a lot of people with him, more than he would be with the BBCI. I don't feel like making that kind of decision at this point, I don't think. See, it's just so rough, because I'm only going to get one run. That's why I'm not going to do it. I'm only going to get one run, because the BBCI is only, and I wouldn't get it with both trains. So it's just not worth it. So then the question becomes, is the SIR worth more than the BBCI? And the answer is yes, because of its increased stock value, it'll go up a little bit more, maybe. Those are about $4 each. I don't know. How much is the BBCI going to make? A 3 train, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 120, 130. It's only going to make one space. 50, 60, 70, 110, 140. So it looks to me like, and, oh, I've got this other one here. Alright, now there's no question the SIR is a better rail. So there's no reason to play around with those stocks. And that's where we're going to sit. And we'll jump into the operating round. And this should be the last round in the game. Some pretty good runs. The EIR put out 43 a share. As an the GIP put out 43 a share as an example, which actually pushed it up 2 spaces instead of just 1. We're also seeing spike dots, like this one down here. It probably isn't going to do anything. No, I'm sorry, this one here. It probably isn't going to do anything. I don't think black runs this track, but there wasn't anywhere else I could place that would hurt anyone. You're just kind of playing these dots to try to clog up someone else's final run. This would have been a really useful place to put it, but that would mean not being able to make the final run I wanted to. I would have to run to here instead of Calcutta, and that hurts me as much as whoever I'm stopping. To do it once early in the game would have made sense, but to do it at this point, no, I'm throwing away money just to try to hurt the ECR. And I'm not hurting it any more than I'm hurting myself. Okay, on to the rest of the rails. At this point, the MSM has yet to run, and it's going to run for, I don't know, probably around 40. There's less than $200 in there, so I'm declaring the bank broken. That allows me to throw the extra money in, and I can also throw money in off some of the companies. Companies that have already gone can't use their cash. Somebody could buy a train off them but that doesn't actually use any of that cash, and it wouldn't do anything anyway. So I'll dump that money in too, just to make my change and bookkeeping a little easier. The MSM may not make 400. I'm looking, it's got these two big trains on it, but it's been cut to shreds by this play here. I can run a 4 train down here, but then I can't come out of there. I was coming out through the south. I don't have another place to come out. I got a little doink here, no increase there. I could run out of here and possibly up through here, and that's not too bad, and then run out in this direction. Geez, I don't know which way is going to be best, because if I do this, I have to blast the track that way. If I do this, I can either get 10, 20, 50, or my big Calcutta, which is clearly worth more. So I'm really kind of cut apart here. What I think I got to do is this run, and I guess either this or this. Either one's is probably as good. Ouch. A little more money, I could put a dot here, but I only had $150. That's enough to get me into here, but not enough to do anything with it. And that's going to be off this railhead. So my other railhead, I really have no open track. I could blast through the mountains here, but I don't have that kind of cash either. That wasn't too terrible. It was $42 a share. Cutting up here, and then just making this little run here. That's only a 3 run, but there just really wasn't another option that would make any money. Oh well. Finally, this operating round, this last operating round, is when the two, the Bombay and the Madras, finally got upgraded. It's been hard for the last few operating rounds because there have been key things that had to be done to hook up the perfect routes for these rails. So nobody really wanted to waste their track lay on that when they've got things that they're fighting for. Yes, it's a nice upgrade, $20 or something, right? Yeah. But there was always better to do. There may have been a period when the 5s first came out when there were a couple of companies that could have made that upgrade instead of some of the stuff they were doing, like instead of adding a doink. But this was a race here, and kind of important. So I don't know. It may depend on the company, but most of them were trying to hook up networks that allow this kind of crossing, say Calcutta to Delhi, or to hit some of the major cities. Although the major cities never became that important because nobody bothered to upgrade them. Everybody was trying to increase their exposure to them rather than upgrading them. We actually saw a 20 run from the SIR, which is pretty sweet, and that gave them double movement. And now we're on the very last train, the ECR. And did things in fine form too, still able to make 57 a share, although this dot hurt them just as much as it hurt purple. They're both running this kind of same sort of track that really involved looping around and hitting this, and it kind of got broken there. And less important for the blue because they didn't have their dot here, I think. I'm not sure. But they still managed to make 57 a share, which is nothing to sneeze at. I think it's the best run yet. And get a double move, putting them in second place on the stock market, only $20 below the EIR. Now they started early too, if I recall correctly. Yeah, that's the 8 train. Somebody set that up right away. Pretty impressive what they managed to do. I think that's going to be, let's see, what do we have here? For stock value, the EIR and the ECR look really, really sweet. And both of them were making good money, although the ECR certainly better in the late game. But the EIR made good money early on. So right now, players 2 and 6 look like they're doing pretty well, especially when you start looking at gee, the GIP made up a lot of ground, but it had a long fallow period. Just trying to guesstimate who's in here. The MSM, that was a seriously bonus corporation. How far it was able to get, given that it was a late starter. But the problem is the BNR was his early starter, I think. I think he's the one who started the BNR, and it went through such a bad period that its stock value is the same. I can't think that he's got a good shot at it. BBCI is obviously a waste. The question is, how well did the investor do? Look at what he's holding, all those ECRs, but some of the other stocks not so impressive. But he's got almost as much ECR as the president of that, which, you know, he avoided the early turns maybe when it wasn't making so much, but ended up getting in position at a good time, and then it just took off, I guess. You know, these have been kind of lackluster. The NWS shows good stock showing, but it too had a really painful period. It's running two trains, which is how it managed to boost its stock, I think, a little bit, and made some decent money towards the end. The SIR, kind of impressive at the very end, but it was just there to make money, you know, in that kind of slow and consistent manner. Where do I put my bet? It's one of these two. The ECR impressed me so much with how it blew open, but it was, and the extra round, the extra operating round definitely helped them. But I'm still going to be edging towards player number 6, having gotten it. All right, I'm going to count these up later, and I'll be back. One of the things I really love doing at the end of an XX game, or a game where there's a lot of, you know, different components to kind of the victory at the end, where you're adding everything up. And usually I just show the spreadsheet, but I get some pleasure out of looking at it as I go forward. So I've added everybody's cash on hand, and I'm going to come back and calculate the stock values in a moment, but you can see the differences here, and our highest is actually over here. Guy who probably had too many shares or had enough certificates early on, but that does show a certain lead. And most intriguing of all, the very last place on cash on hand is one of the people I thought had the best chance of winning, and certainly earlier I did. But when I look at his cash production, and part of it's because of the SIR investment, not really invested in any of the big earners except the EIR for the most part. And of course, that trailed off at the end. I'm beginning to realize this is not very likely. Of course, the next place person, the person who I also thought was going to be in good shape, doesn't tend to be that high either at 23.22. He's in the top half, but there are two people ahead of him. Our grand investor, who of course has the problem of being behind at least one share from everyone else because he has no presidency. And yeah, that's that one. And this guy up here, who doesn't own anything either, so he's back a share there as well. Now shares are worth about $300, so if you take that extra share out of there, they're much more in line with the other players. Yeah, he lost his presidency as well. So that's why they have more cash. But right now it looks very close. Now when we calculate out the shares, ECRs, EIRs, and NWRs are the big money here. They're the ones making 300 or more. And it's not a huge difference, you know, $20 a share. It's going to depend on the rest of the portfolio as well. Then we have a second tier with the GIP, BNR, and whatever the purple MSM coming in there. And then these guys who are worth half as much at best, you know, as the second tier, and a third the primary tier. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at somebody with 5 shares of the big guys. Over here, 4, looks like 4 shares of big guys. 2, 5, 6 shares of the big guys. 2, 3. Yeah, he's not gonna do it. 4, 5, 6 again. And it's not the people who are running the big companies. And I think it's the 4 shares only thing. But this guy has 4 big guys, but then he also has 4, 5, 6 of the medium range. So I think he's still in it. But it's kind of interesting to see that the people who are running the big companies actually aren't necessarily the ones to come out the best from it. And you can see, I mean, I got 30% of it. You only have 40. You know, but I got lucky for the investor in holding those ECRs. Could have fallen a lot of different ways. There's no reason that he had to believe that those were going to be terribly valuable. That's just what he was stuck with. All right, I'll calculate the stock options when I get some time. Kind of what we see stretching down in terms of stock values for all of these. And this isn't too important, but we definitely see, you know, the conglomeration that player number 6 has in a few stocks. Mostly middling, but the EIRs, of course. And let's see who has really strong looking holdings. Everything kind of looks like it's not too big a deal. So in a sense, I'm kind of thinking, geez, these don't even look too bad. So he's going to be in the lead maybe? And indeed that's the case at 56.32. But we see that number 6 player who I thought had, you know, was in the top 2 actually shows up as number 5 in the ordering. Player number 4 over here, who did the jerking around with the BNR, yeah, he ended up in pretty bad shape. He wasn't maybe the person I thought would be in the worst shape, though. I actually thought the leading player would be doing among the worst. And I'm kind of confused as to where all his cash came from. Now, this is the guy who started. You want to see? I don't know. These aren't the right orders, are they? Yeah, I don't think these are the right orders here. The different players, if that's correct. Yeah, but he's the guy who started the BBCI, if I remember correctly. He got his company taken away from him, but that's the camera. But somehow managed to invest well enough, good shares of the MSM, which did very well. He didn't end up in that kind of hell pool that the BNR owner ended up in. My feeling is there has to be some kind of mistake, because that is not what I would have predicted, that someone who lost their company managed to somehow blunder into the right stock combination for this. I would have been more accepting that this guy did, our pure investor, and he actually came in second. Now, this guy paid for a couple of engines out of pocket. Not huge amounts, but $100 at a key point in the game when that money actually mattered, and then another 30 later when it basically is just $30 off his total. So you can kind of see why he's behind everyone else. He took a hit that no one else took. But why the hell? I really have no idea. Wow. You know, are these in order? Yeah, this looks like this is the BBCI player who put this here. Maybe I slipped him an extra $100 at some point when it was in, when it made a big deal. The MSMs are clearly a big thing, and the NWR, long-term good running company. So it's almost as though the BBCI was making good money for a long time. He got out of it entirely, basically. Held one certificate in the hopes of, bringing it out of receivership. But wasn't able to keep control of it. So that was a loss for him. But the shocking thing to me, the ECR player, I thought he'd be doing quite well. Cash on hand, sure. These two guys were kind of low on cash on hand. But they had two companies each at one point at least. Well, this guy is down to just one corporation. So he doesn't have an extra certificate here. Interesting. And his stock value doesn't look terribly valuable either. He's got one of the top two, as does this guy. But they don't have the diversified stock holding of good, strong stocks across the board, I guess. Although I see these. Those are pretty good. This. But he's holding a couple of crap stocks. He's got nothing bad in his portfolio. He did not hold on to the end anything horrible, and he had the BBCI for a while. No, there's definitely an issue there. This guy, big hunk of stocks that never went anywhere, right? This guy has the presidency of that company that never really went anywhere. Got kind of cut off down here. This guy, we've got our example for him. All right, well, I'm shocked and stunned by this, to tell you the truth. And I guess that only just tells me there's a lot more to learn about this game than I've caught from this single playing. There's no question about that. I've been a little bit uncertain all throughout the play, but I definitely would not have predicted that. You saw my predictions. It was to the two guys who are holding presidencies of really high-ranking companies. But that 40% holding limit is a big deal in the six-player game, I think. I think that means that you've got to worry a lot more about your external investments than in most games. In most games, if you're a big company and you've got your 50, 60%, well, 60%, let's assume, does well, you've done pretty well. All right, I'm going to load this one up, and I'll come back with a review after I clean this up, but it's going to take